I've been playing some sort of Vanilla WoW version straight up, no stop, pretty much since 2 years ago. But contrary to what you might think from my videos, I was never a pure vanilla Andy. If you go back to my channel back when I was still on private servers, I made videos on Cataclysm, Rato the Lich King, TBC, even some random custom servers. And while I love Vanilla WoW, and I think Vanilla WoW is, I dare say, one of the best games ever made, and like most people that play Vanilla WoW, I do not think vanilla is a sacred concept. I do not think vanilla has no room for improvement. And on top of that, Vanilla WoW is not my favorite expansion. That honor would go to the Burning Crusade. I made the case many times before that tryharding and actually optimizing the game is something that has no place in the classic system, and I think Mist of Pandaria, even though I'm gonna give it a shot and I'm probably gonna have fun for a while, it will never scratch the same itch a classic expansion would. I think TBC, however, is the ultimate classic experience. That doesn't mean it doesn't have any drawbacks, but it actually has way more upsides, and the barrier of entry is much lower to a new player, and because the raids are smaller, the pogging community is a lot healthier. I might make a video on it at some point. The pogging community in Classic Anniversary is not going too strong right now. It still exists, right? It's never gonna end. But if you want to pog a raid, you are in for a lot of pain in Vanilla WoW. It is just a logistical nightmare. Now, all the good things I'm gonna talk about, well, mostly, comes from the TBC early experience, because I am fully aware by the time you get Black Temple, TBC falls off a little bit. I don't think that's gonna be a too controversial thing, but I think the general experience or value you can get from the game after you are fully raid geared falls off quite a lot. It doesn't mean Black Temple is a bad raid or anything like that, I don't mean that. Black Temple is a solid raid, but TBC eventually becomes just a raid logging game after you get your entire grind, and that's fine, but I don't think that's the best that TBC has to offer. Now, the main value I find in TBC compared to Vanilla WoW is class balance. And no, TBC is not balanced. I know, warlocks, shamans, haha, you could make a raid of 25 warlocks and shamans and nobody would bat an eye, haha. But what it is an expansion where almost every spec has a viable, reasonable spot in a raid, except rogues. Do not play a rogue in TBC, please. Now, class balance is not just a measure of people's damage, and oh, this class does more damage than me and that's not fair. That's not why I care about class balance in Classic WoW. Let's be honest, the content is not that hard. It's not like you cannot clear or you couldn't clear Molten Core without warriors. Of course you could have, but World of Warcraft is a game where people choose who they put in their raids. And if you play a weaker spec or a weaker class or a class with no utility, you are a lot less likely to get in a raid and you are a lot less likely to have a good experience with the game. Once again, why never play a rogue? Never play a rogue. I think TBC is the ultimate solution to this problem of not being able to put classes in the raids, and they achieved it without actually going for actual balance, actual DPS balance. And the way they achieved a very diverse roster of classes in a raid is utility. Almost every spec except rogues has some sort of buff or debuff that makes the entire raid better. A Shadow Priest is not an amazing DPS class on its own. Their damage is pretty okay, even mediocre. They got no AoE, and they also have threat issues, but they provide free mana and they give an insane 15% damage buff to warlocks. Yes, they got two separate buffs. You got smaller things like the Boom King giving 3% crit, or you got the Elemental Shaman giving people spell hit, and it actually not only balances for class, it actually balances for skill. Yes, that Elemental Shaman may not be too good, but every caster wants that hit, so you might as well take him. He's still helping the raid a lot by being there. Or yes, warriors are not the best tank or DPS anymore, but who's gonna put the Sunders? What are we gonna do, get a rogue? The class balance of TBC, as imperfect and sometimes quite honestly stupid as it can be, in my opinion, enables people of diverging skill levels to play with each other and to be happy about playing with each other. If you let me reminisce a little bit about the old vanilla community before Classic, and I don't even talk about Nostalrius, I am talking about vanilla gaming, okay? 2015, stuff like that. Maybe it wasn't because the community was mature enough, there wasn't enough people, period, but you had extremely experienced and committed players playing along noobs. I could go there with my tiny night elf druid and suck, and people were okay with it. The tryhards coexisted with the casuals. There was never this thing of like super insane guilds and super terrible guilds or pogs or whatever. Everybody hung out with each other, and I think that social experience is a lot more positive for the game, even if it came at the cost of raid performance. And I think TBC is one of the last expansions where that is still something that keeps happening. Of course, there's still some raids at the very top, some guilds at the very top that are very sweaty, but your average TBC player is not a person that cares about parses. When Classic Anniversary is over and we go to TBC Anniversary, the white main people are gonna go back to white main. Another value from TBC that I think is very important is that I think TBC struck a very good balance of hard dungeons and simple raids. I talked a lot in my Season of Discovery videos that I do not think Scarlet Enclave should be hard. I never thought AQ40 should be hard, or Nax Ramas should be hard, or whatever. I made my point that every time you make it harder, the population of the game goes down, because we got the graph, we got the data, and we know it's true. And TBC raids are no loot piñatas, they are not easy. I'm not trying to say they are super easy, but compared to something like a Rato de Lich King Heroic, yeah, they are quite easy until you get to like Black Temple. You could still poke them, you could still take suboptimal specs, you could still take players that weren't honestly very good. But the dungeons, the heroic dungeons, were a massive filter. You could not just go into a dungeon and stomp over it over and over and over. In Vanilla WoW, once your warriors get some blues, dungeons become extremely trivial content. Dungeons in TBC are quite a challenge even for a person in full dungeon blues. It is a meme in the community that trash is the hardest boss of TBC, and clearing trash in TBC dungeons is really annoying. They do a lot of damage, they are very unforgiving, they got spells you get a kick or you die. In some cases, like Shattered Halls Heroic, if you do not kite the trash, you got a very low chance of surviving it. They do a lot of damage. And that makes it so the difficulty curve for a new player from going to dungeons to raids is not that bad. By the time everybody gets to a raid in TBC, they have a decent knowledge of their class, because otherwise they wouldn't have the gear to go into a raid. But class balance has other effects in the game that are not quite so visible. For example, gear distribution is a lot easier when half the players are not warriors, and healers go from second class citizens to very valuable members of the raid that are treated with a red carpet sometimes, especially shamans. When it comes to the pre-raid best in slot grind, I think TBC is the best experience that I ever got in a game. I am not even kidding. I think the fresh level 70 experience in TBC is an experience in WoW that has never been matched. You got several reputations, every single one of them has a cool epic that most of them you actually need. You need reputation to even access heroic dungeons. And on top of that, this is a chart of all the attunements you have to complete to get access to all the content in TBC. Of course, you do not do this all in one sitting. You got stuff like Hyjal, that's for later. But getting the attunement to just Karazhan is gonna require you to clear 4 dungeons. I know attunements are very unpopular in TBC for whatever reason, but I never understood it, because if you know the attunement is coming, you need to do those dungeons anyway for gear. Shadow Labs, Steambolts, Alcatraz, and the Black Morass. These are all dungeons that you're gonna be encountering across your normal farm. You need the reputation to even get into heroics anyway. You're gonna be clearing all these dungeons at some point. Yeah, maybe it's like a bit of a rush in the first week, and maybe you're not gonna get an attunement the first week, but it's not like the attunements are slowing you down. I always like the attunements in TBC, and yes, attunements start getting pretty annoying by the time you get to tier 5, but having more reasons to do dungeons is something I really like. From the time you hit level 70 to the time you get full Karazhan loot, you can always log into TBC and always have something that is productive and actually fun to do. No more AFK in Alterac Valley, no more farming gold so you can dump it all in a single raid. You go do dungeons because you need gear. You are playing the game. Touching up a little on the economy, aside from one glaring flaw in the TBC economy, which is Terracone, it is a very scarce resource. Consumables in TBC are a lot cheaper. There is less of them because they limited you to 2 types of elixir or flask, so you do not need 15 items to go into a raid anymore. Engineering, while still useful, is not mandatory anymore, and it doesn't greatly affect your DPS anymore. And most of your gold is going to go into professions. Almost every single class has a huge item they can get from professions early on. You got several items from professions that are not only pre-rate best in slot, but some of them stay best in slot all the way to tier 5. We got things like the Spellfire Robe, which is spell power for arcane and fire, so every boomkin, every warlock is gonna want it, every mage. You also got Shadow Whip, which is the same but in shadow and frost for the Shadow Bolt spamming warlocks. Fire warlocks are very viable early on, okay? I know people think that TBC is all about Shadow Bolt. Yes, but early on fire is actually a little better. Most people still go Shadow Bolt because it's easier. But also you got things like Dragon Strike. Every warrior wants to get 2 of these maces because they are freaking insane. On top of that, now that we're talking about professions, every profession gets a significant improvement into what they can do for you. We got things like the extremely broken Drums of Battle from Leatherworking. They are basically a free and weaker Bloodlust that you can pop along your Bloodlust. And that makes Leatherworkers very valuable, so you can craft your best in slot gear and actually help the raid. You don't have to drop it for engineering anymore. You also got some other things like the Elixir Master or Potion Master. Alchemists get a chance of getting an extra item and getting a double item every time they make one of the items they specialize in, which also gives people a chance to make money with professions, because on average they produce more than the items cost. And while by no means professions were complete or finished or even balanced, once again leatherworking is very broken, I think it is a shame that TBC was a huge step in the right direction of making professions important and good and fun, and they were kinda downgraded into Wrath of the Lich King. But they are a lot more interesting than in vanilla, let me tell you what. You may be wondering why I haven't talked about the TBC world. Well, there is a downside to TBC. I think flying mounts are bad for the game. And I think late at night, when they are in the privacy of their home, Blizzard thinks the same thing. There is a reason they try to take away flying in Warlords of Draenor. They also realize that you cannot take flying away. The community will never allow it. But I think world content in TBC, even though it wasn't as solid as in vanilla, still had some good additions. Most people regard Neygrand as one of the best zones ever made, and I tend to agree with it. I love that place. But there is also some little things, like you remember that tower PvP objective they experimented with in the later stages of vanilla with the Plaguelands objectives? No, I am not talking about Hellfire Peninsula, nobody cares about that one. The towers in Terokar Forest are a big deal. If your faction controls all the towers, you can get spirit shards every time you kill a boss in Aukindon, and these are really important because yes, this is a PvP objective and you can get some PvP items for it, but more than that, you can get amazing meta gems and you can also get mana potions. There is the carrot and there is the stick. In vanilla WoW, if you rank, you get a bunch of gear, and if you do not have that gear, you are forever behind, so you are forced to go to PvP. That's the stick. In TBC, if you go to the open world and you PvP and you get the towers, you can do dungeons and you can get free consumables. Now that's an amazing carrot. I wish they would do more of these things for other consumables, especially Terracone. The supply is very low and it is the bottleneck for making every elixir. It would have been really sweet if you could get it. But regardless, PvP is something you can do and you get rewarded for doing. You can even get some really good items if you're a tank, because Resilience, the new PvP stat, is actually pretty good for tanking. The PvP weapons are best in slot for tanking until tier 5 actually. But if you're a pure PvPer, which I am not, you got a nice little nest where you can actually play PvP instead of complaining. I think in Vanilla WoW we are stuck in two different camps of PvE people that don't want to do PvP and they get mad every time somebody goes to Alterac Valley to actually fight people because it slows down the game, and the PvPers are not happy because everybody is skipping the PvP just to get more honor. In TBC, if you care about PvP and you care about skill and you care about gear and you care about being good, some would say that arenas are the crowning achievement of TBC because they are the one piece of content that is a fan favorite, one of the most popular things to do in World of Warcraft to this day in the newer expansions, and it all started here. Now, I am not a PvPer, I never really PvP'd, it is not my thing, but having a system where your success and your gear and your rewards are dictated by how much you win instead of how much you AFK in a battleground, and in a place where you can get a team together and get your friends into it, there is a reason that arenas are so popular. Most World of Warcraft streamers, they started as arena players, they started as arena streamers, and that's because you can finally distinguish yourself if you're good at the game. If you get an orange parse in Molten Core, nobody cares. If you get High Warlord in Classic Anniversary, nobody cares. Congratulations, you AFK'd in Alterac Valley. But if you are Gladiator, that means something. But what I miss about TBC the most is the community. I am not trying to say that TBC people are the nicest people on earth. I am not trying to say that TBC is this communist utopia where everybody is happy. I am trying to say that the expectations in TBC are very different from the expectations in Vanilla WoW. People talk about the vanilla community. Let me tell you that the people that played vanilla private servers before Classic are mostly gone. Those people either went to other private servers or quit. They gave Classic a shot, and when BWL came out and the real colors of the Classic community came in and the try-harding, the optimization came in, a lot of people were not used to it and a lot of people didn't like it. Alex Sensual made a very good point. I know, super ironic, Alex Sensual, but he said that the Classic people today are not the people from Vanilla. They are the people that quit in Warlords of Draenor. And I think he's very right. I think the retail mentality came into Vanilla in one way or another, and then it mutated into what it is today. But TBC has never been that, because it can't. The incentives of the game, the way the raids are laid out, the way gear progression is laid out, the average person just wants to play a video game and then they wanna go do something else. And I think once the dust settles and Classic Anniversary is over and we go to TBC Anniversary, all the Era people go back to Era, and we see all the Season of Discovery people go back into TBC, for just one moment, for just a month, we are gonna get to experience World of Warcraft the way it was supposed to be again. Or the Classic community is beyond repair. I don't know. But I do know TBC is the last hope. What do you think? Would you rather be playing Classic Anniversary or TBC? Let me show you something funny. I made a poll in my channel. Would you rather be playing AQ40 or TBC? And in a channel where I haven't made a TBC video in more than 2 years, 82% of people voted for TBC. I do not think those people even like TBC more than Vanilla, all of them. I just think that people are tired of Vanilla. I just think people want some change, mixing it up. We've been stuck in the Vanilla world for 2 years. I don't know, I just need a break. Holy crap. Subscribe, join the Discord, and thank you for watching.